Hey, everybody, and welcome. It's Tony Zayas here at another episode of the Tech Founders Show, where we get a chance to talk to some amazing founders who are really pushing innovation and changing the way we work, live, and play. And today I'm excited to talk to a pretty interesting founder who has an incredible background and is doing some amazing things. It's Jehan Hamedi. He's the CEO and founder of Vizit. And Vizit's mission is to provide the technology and insights consumer brands need to optimize their visual content to increase sales and create stronger connections with their customers on every channel. So some super interesting stuff. With that, I will bring Jehan on. Hey, Jehan, how are you doing?
Hey, Tony, I'm doing great. Thanks for having me on the show.
Awesome. Yeah, thank you for joining. We're excited to talk to you here. I guess just to get started, I gave the little brief snippet about Vizit, but I would love to hear your version of that, and then just the origin. How did you start the business?
Sure. So Vizit, you nailed it. Our story starts with images. We are the first visual intelligence company. We're here because we found that there's just an incredible opportunity that we've learned from our partners and our customers with visual content and understanding, that consumers now, if you can believe it, they scroll through skyscrapers worth of content every day. The chief creative officer or the head of creative at Ogilvy said it's the Statue of Liberty worth of content. So if you think about that, just the sheer volume of visual material that everybody is seeing and interacting with, it's kind of changed the rules for selling, for marketing, for communication. You now have to stand out within this kind of sea of same, kind of this infinite scroll. Yeah. And Vizit's approach to this problem is kind of rooted in data. So kind of telling that story of the genesis of the company. So I've spent the last 10 years of my career in kind of an interesting field of quantitative social science, which is sort of a fancy kind of way of saying studying and understanding how different consumers and populations of people interact with content on the internet. And much of my background and sort of my previous life, I was building insight platforms on top of text analysis. So if you think of all of the social media commentary and comments and blogs, and if you're a brand and you launch a new campaign, or you're Nike and you launch the new LeBron James shoe, it creates a large conversation. And that conversation is rich with insights. And, from people sort of kind of from my background and that had worked with large brands, you kind of refer to that as the voice of the customer and like a new way of understanding the voice of the customer at scale. But now images are worth 60,000 words, and images and designs are what are powering trillions of dollars of e-commerce purchases and campaigns all around the world. So Vizit sort of exists to provide a new lens on an entirely new source of consumer data that doesn't come from the voice of the customer. It unveils the view of the customer. What are consumers seeing? What do they want to see? And importantly, if you're a brand, how can you create a visual brand that's compelling and enthralling to both captivate and kind of convert through that visual dimension, the visual medium? So I would summarize that by saying we measure images.
It's super fascinating to that point. I was thinking about this in preparation. Just there's so many, to your point, there's that Statue of Liberty of visual content that we're looking at every day. So you came from the side where you were focused on not the visual, but the content. What do you see as the big difference in the takeaways of what you're learning when you were kind of studying and looking at the metrics and behavior behind the text content versus the visual content? I'd be curious to get your take on that.
Yeah, so really two things. So the first is that people don't read anymore, they recognize. It's a fact. So much of the industry is focused so much on descriptions and kind of text, but the image and that like the visual component has a markedly more powerful impact on the ultimate performance. And we've proven that out. So on every single occasion. But the other really interesting thing that we sort of learned in the early genesis of our company is that much of that prior technology that I described used AI, and it used natural language processing and some of that kind of advanced text analysis technology to understand and report on what had happened in the past. So using my same example of launching a shoe, it spurs a conversation, and then you use this technology to measure, or that previous technology to measure and mine it. But that it doesn't give you quite the actionable data that you need if you're somebody that says, well, but I have a new campaign and I'm about to put an incredible amount of capital behind it. Or I have a new product and that product has a face, it's got packaging, it's got a design. I can't get that wrong for all of these reasons and how the consumers now behave. So you need something predictive. And so we sort of went from, this kind of orientation in the industry of reporting and kind of on the analysis of text to predicting the performance of imagery. And in order to do that, we had to have this sort of wacky idea of, hey, you know what? There are oceans and oceans of data points on visual material. In fact, it is one of the largest data sets in the world that is completely underutilized. And so we thought, if you could figure out a way to mine this data and create a software simulation that learned from interaction rates with types of, that will give you insight into the types of content that people are more drawn to and have a more favorable response to versus other favorable response, you could ultimately create a artificial simulation of an entire audience of people. And if you could do that, you could then predict, given a new piece of content or a new product design, how the real world audience would ultimately respond. And the beauty of AI is it's very, very fast. So you can get your answers while you're creating. So it was sort of this thing where we learned from our customers, we saw where the market was going, consumer behavior as folks sort of rooted in consumer insights had shifted markedly, but the technology and the data had sort of led us to this visual medium that our customers were telling us, look, we think there could be a source of competitive advantage hidden there. We just don't know how to harness it and untap it, but we'd like to do it first. And that's sort of kind of our story and how we got here.
So when did you, I'm assuming you had those cues and those insights, when did you actually, timing wise, make the decision to say, yeah, we're going to, run with this idea and build a business and a product out of it?
Oh my gosh, I can't remember the specific time, but I do remember the instance. So we were doing a lot of diagnostics and looking at data of all sorts. And just like every startup, you kind of go through different iterations of your technology, iterations of your product packaging, who you think your customers are, who they actually are. But I do remember very distinctly that I had I phoned Vizit's VP of engineering, and I think he was driving across the country at the time. And I said, "Hey, Zach, what's going on?" And he goes, "Oh, not too much. Like, what's happening?" I said, "Well, we're doing images now." And so he goes, "Awesome, I'm in. Like, let's do it." And it's just one of those things where we're a startup too. We've gone through and have been fortunate to go through an incubator that PepsiCo was a sponsor of. And you learn and you just find that focus and really kind of zeroing in on ultimately what's driving results, but where you can kind of see the market going really helps you focus your resources and your team and ultimately your strategy, because you don't have the resources of a multi-billion-dollar company with 20 product lines. You have one. Yeah. And so we realized we were pretty good at something, and now we exclusively specialize in the advanced analysis of imagery.
That's awesome. So I'm curious, what is the team makeup at Vizit?
So our team makeup is, I would say, data is in our DNA. Most of the core team, myself included, most of us have cut our teeth on kind of working with large consumer brands, building insights platforms or designing research process. So several of us hail from Crimson Hexagon, which was one of the first and early movers in the kind of enterprise consumer insight space, sort of the precursor to what ultimately became social network analysis, which ultimately became social listening, and now social listening is kind of part of a whole other category. But folks from Data Robot and Affectiva, which are two very well-known and really awesome AI companies here in Boston, Zappy, Edelman Intelligence, there's sort of a cast of characters and just an incredible team. But the thing that sort of binds us all together is understanding consumers and helping brands better connect with their consumers. And at some point in all of our careers, we've sort of built an insight platform or had done some type of analysis where we help change and ultimately improve decision making.
It's very cool. Now, you're in Boston, correct?
We are, yeah. I if you can tell from my voice, I have a bit of a nasally accent. I'm a Wisconsin guy. My folks, my family still live in Wisconsin, but I've called Boston home for over 10 years now, and we built our team out here.
That's cool. I'm a Chicagoan, so I recognize
Hey.
sense. So
that's great. Well, my wife's family's from Chicago, so we have this Packers Bears rivalry.
I'm sure.
I'm not reading the ESPN news today with what I guess Aaron Rodgers is airing out his laundry, so I'm staying out of that. But Chicago's near and dear to my heart too. A lot of fun.
Very cool. I was going to ask, just I know a bit about the community, like both startup and tech in Boston. How would you describe it?
I couldn't imagine building and launching Vizit in any other city. I think the resources here are incredible. The support network, the angel investors and folks that are just, really looking for, kind of hungry ideas like napkin stage. I remember those pitches. But the universities here do a really wonderful job. There's so much talent in Boston. There's new ideas and new research coming out of BU and MIT and Harvard and every other Northeastern, all the great schools. But we were very fortunate too to participate in a couple of incubators, one of which was Mass Challenge, which is here in Boston, and they're awesome. They gave us our start. They helped connect us to corporate partners. Introduce us to some wonderful advisors, and you can just kind of feel like that, building a technology company in Boston, there's sort of this camaraderie and you're kind of part of the fabric of innovation that sort of is kind of ingrained in the culture here. And, I'm of course totally biased. So if you have listeners that are on the West Coast, I don't know a ton about your ecosystem, but Boston has done a really nice job by us, and it's been a lot of fun.
Yeah, that's cool. Now I've spent some time with a couple of companies up there, and it seems to be the case. So that's really cool. From a perspective of who do you go to when you have questions, when you have challenges, what does your peer network and perhaps mentor network look like? And, what are some of the ways that you stay engaged with others to keep you at the forefront?
Yeah, that's a great question. So, there's a lot of people. There's a lot of people that I turn to. I think one of the most important things as a founder or CEO or any executive is you got to be comfortable with what you don't know, and be comfortable asking. And that's something that is very important to me. I know what I know, and I know some things really well, and there's other things that I don't know well. And so as I sort of approach, kind of building a business, I try and surround myself with people who are really talented and really experienced in the areas in which I'm most inexperienced, or in things that I'm just not quite as wired for. And so that tends to be a mix. My old boss and mentor and advisor is somebody that I probably talk to at least once a week, because he's been through similar problems at similar companies and at similar and later stages. I talk to our customers. So we have sort of an informal customer advisory board right now, but I mean, they are the most talented and passionate and obviously innovative people to take a chance on an early startup. So I find that I can just get some incredible unfiltered sort of Jehan, this is a bad idea, kind of advice and feedback, or hey, you're onto something. And sometimes you can really strike gold and come up with a whole new product concept or a new use case. But I think it really comes down to as you start up, think about past employers and mentors that you've had, other professors that you might have stayed in touch with, particularly if you've gone through a business program, or if you're more of a technology founder, getting close to the departments in which you got your degree can provide you with some really great feedback and guidance as to how to kind of go about architecting a new software system.
Yeah.
And then, just the advisors and sort of talent around Boston, I've found that there's just a sort of a community and kind of an unspoken bond that, you can reach out to folks and ask them questions, and they tend to be very generous with the time. And then what I try and do is when that same thing happens to me, I like to pay it forward, and give back, because it's just, everybody has these problems, and you find in entrepreneurship, like, you need the answer yesterday. so it's really important to have kind of that speed dial of, okay, this is an ops question about this topic. Who do I know there? Oh, she is an absolute expert. I'll give her a quick call and see if maybe she can help. So
that's great.
That's a method of madness.
Yeah. No, that's fantastic. And I think you raise a really good point. And on this show, we talk to founders, and that's very much a recurring theme, is that, reaching out and asking for support from others, and how willing typically people tend to be who have been there and done that. And I think the importance of knowing that going into it, if you're an early stage, and not being afraid to ask, and building up a network of people that you can ask questions. How did you go about, and do you still actively grow those type of relationships where you have, where you become part of that community? How did you go about that? And obviously you've been at things for a while now, but what type of effort do you put into that with growing that and nurturing those relationships and that network?
Yeah. Well, so absolutely, I'm still focused on it. I focus on it every day. One of the big defining kind of pillars of Vizit's culture as an organization, and something that's really important to me, is just be human. It's that simple. And it might sound kind of ironic coming from an AI company, but be human. People are, treat somebody the way you want to be treated. If you're in the B2B business, you're ultimately selling to a person somewhere. If you're selling B2C, you're trying to have a direct relationship with consumers. And so, I find that, just being kind of genuine and transparent and also helpful. I always try and, when I meet somebody new, that the way those introductions usually go is, so tell me about you, I'll tell you about me. What are you up to? And, I'll tell them, and, how can I help you? And then, thank you so much. How can I help you? And so I always think that a great way to go about it is to just sort of think about, for your, both for your team, what are some, if you're a CEO sort of looking at, your executive team or your directors or any new hires, think about, what are some of the support resources that would really help them and would really kind of bring a new perspective and sort of enrich them. Because the one thing you do not have and you cannot create more of as a startup is time. So it's important then to sort of build relationships and kind of start, ultimately recruiting in folks to kind of become part of your vision, help your team, but then in turn help them, and if that's helping them with a new job opportunity, if it's, something like, hey, you work at a small company, so maybe you're not quite in Vizit's target market, but we can help you out. Like, let's figure out a way to make sure we can return the favor and help you. So I just think when you're in commerce, when you're sort of having conversations like you and I are having today, it creates an echo chamber. It creates a conversation, and I think it's important to participate ultimately, because if you don't participate, then you're sort of missing out on some of those human interactions where you could really, not only help somebody, but just, learn more about something that you might not know about. And particularly if you're fundraising, that's sort of a really important part of the process is meeting people and seeing who's sort of a thesis fit, but also who's a personality fit, who's a cultural fit. And that just comes through meeting.
So I'm assuming you guys have raised funds?
Yes, we have.
I would just love to hear, this is also something we typically like to talk about, because it's, it's a big undertaking for those who are going through it the first time to get prepared for what, it entails going out and pitching. What was your experience like with it?
Well, it's a learning experience. I think the thing that a lot of first-time founders will think about, as I certainly thought about, was I need a deck. I have to have this deck. And as soon as I have this deck, I'm going to raise all this money. A deck is important, but it's one small piece. And in fact, your deck should be treated as a living document. Because I found that really, quite well. Like my view of sort of how I was going to sort of describe the business and describe the opportunity, using my words and my visuals, might not be presented in the most effective way to a investor that's looking at dozens of different companies a week across a number of categories. So I learned pretty quickly. I'd say one of the first things is, we have, again, data in our DNA. Like we're certainly a technology and product first company as we sort of birthed this and invested a lot in our intellectual property. But you don't want to go into a investor pitch when you're leading with, here's this cool technology that we built. They'd say, okay, how are you going to make money on that? And what is the problem you're solving? And of course there's many, but there's just really a great, just like if you're interviewing for a job, you need repetition. You need to the more people that you talk to, the more you learn about areas and expectations that people had from your pitch. People start asking the question 2 or 3 times. You might wonder, well, maybe I didn't present that as clearly, or, maybe I actually didn't refine that part of my business plan as well. So I think the way that you kind of have to go about it is you do have to have some steel skin. You'll get the folks that say, this is science fiction. This is never going to work. And I got that a few times. And you smile and you say, I really appreciate your feedback. I look forward to showing you what we can do at the Vizit, in the future. And I just kind of take that as motivation. Like, I know this is possible. And I feel like what sort of helps galvanize this effort, because it's a slog, particularly that first round. But what galvanizes that effort is your team and the caliber, quality, and just passion of the folks that you surround yourself with, because they are the company, they are the product, they are the market opportunity. And the investor isn't investing in some concept of Visit, they're investing in its people. So I think the more that you can really emphasize team and bring that to the forefront of, here's why we are doing this and why we are the team to pull this off. That really differentiates your pitch, and I certainly didn't learn that in my first go around. But it's a fun experience. I tell everybody it's one, again, where you need steel skin, but you're going to learn so much. And what you'll find with investors is they know lots of other investors, and many of them that decide not to invest. And this is something that I thought was incredible in Boston, is they'll still offer advice. And it might be, I don't know this space. I think what you're doing is really cool. It's not the right fit for my thesis and what I've done in the past. Yeah. But if there's any way I can be helpful to you, let me know. And there have just been some incredible individuals that have been in that camp, and it's good to take them up on it. It's good to keep them apprised, because you just never know. But I'd say it's all learning. The worst thing you can do is give the exact same pitch 10 times in a row and hope for the best. But ultimately, when you find one lead investor that has an incredible amount of conviction and belief and trust, and kind of just culturally, philosophically is aligned with you and the core team, that's when you have the recipe for success.
That's awesome. Now, I have to say that you're the first person that we've talked to that has put the emphasis on, in the pitching, on focusing, and I think it makes a ton of sense, and I love that you share this, but focusing on the team, because as you said, the concept is one thing, but then there has to be people behind that make it happen. And to your point of, be human, the culture that you guys are fostering and all of that, it's that balance, right? Because if the technology just was perfect on its own, then there'd be no need for people to be working on it, right? So that's really cool. So I appreciate that insight. And then I would love to hear more, with you guys being, a technical AI company, data being in your DNA, all that stuff. How do you find the people that are a good fit to build that right culture, because of the importance of the people that you need to carry out, do the things you want to do? It's got to be a right fit for that culture and to continue to push it forward. So I'd just love to hear, what does your process look like? How have you developed that team, and any learnings that?
Oh, you cut out for a second there. Maybe but any learning, I think this is where they dropped off.
Exactly. Yeah.
So I would say that the way that we've kind of gone about building our team, and frankly, for any of the tech founders or aspiring tech founders that are listening, there is no easy solution. There's no, you look on Angel List and you find your perfect team. That's not the way it works. I think the first thing that you really want to do is sort of take a step back and think about, what does the company need at this stage? What are the skill sets that we need to get us to the next stage? And you have to think very, very specifically about that, because many times, if you think about marketers, there are lots of different types of marketers. B2B marketers, there are so many different disciplines in B2B marketers. So I think the first thing is just being very honest with yourself, and also talking to your advisors and your team about, how do we get this concept, this seed idea, to the next stage? What has to happen? And that process gets a lot easier if you're coming from a background of selling or working in product or in marketing for a similar or adjacent company or adjacent industry, because your past experience will have then exposed you to the relevant skill sets. You will have built relationships and trust with other people who have either worked with you in the past or were partners at other companies in your past life. And, so it's really, I found it one of the most important things is to think about what the goals are, and then think about who you know and who you trust in that first batch, in that first set of hires, because the initial team that you surround yourself with is again that lifeblood of the company. And if you have any kind of bad hires at that stage, it can have a catastrophic impact on future hires, as you could imagine. So I found, what worked for me in that. I was very fortunate and very lucky to have just an incredible group of former colleagues, friends, former partners that shared in Vizit's vision, and in fact accelerated it 10x. It's something where you really have to get the right brains in the room. And one of my colleagues, Eli Orkin, has been with us since the very beginning, and he's somebody that I worked with at my past company. And it's sort of those kind of pillars, and that's just one example, but those pillars of both, what are you trying to achieve? What do you stand for? What do you want to build? Like you have to know that with these first set of team members that you bring along, they're going to weather some very hard storms. You're going to have weeks and months where you run into a brick wall, and then you say, I can either keep sitting here, I could go backwards, or I could go around. And it takes a really unique, I think, skill set and sort of agility, but also sort of a passion to kind of weather that. And of course, as an AI company too, you have to be able to find and recruit some incredible technical talent. You have to. It's a very, very competitive space. And, AI as an industry has just exploded. And we're fortunate to be in a segment of AI, visual AI, that is very underdeveloped relative to what you might, read with voice AI and Alexa, but we found that the something that has worked really well for us is we try to, recruit technical talent and build our R&D team is, again, that be human. If you're joining Vizit, you're joining Vizit to be a part of something. We're charting a new course. You're going to work on problems that have never been solved before on Earth. And that gets technologists, it kind of gives you goosebumps. You think like, this is really cool. I know it's going to be hard. There isn't a playbook for this, but there's a certain breed of person that's what kind of wakes them up in the morning. That's what gets them out of bed. They don't want the kind of the mill type, rinse and repeat sort of, or I'm kind of working on this one component of this larger system and I'm making incremental changes. I just want to go build something. So I think through that, if your first set of hires are kind of, they share in that vision, they bring that passion, they elevate you and they elevate each other. Now you've got an initial team that also knows other similar people that share that vision, and you just start amplifying your message as you go. And then over time, you start to build in cultural norms in the company of, when we're recruiting or when we're interviewing, what are some of the things that we look for? And that just takes time. But again, it comes back to that initial core team. And I couldn't be more thankful for all the visitors that are on our team today.
That's great. So shifting gears just a little bit, as the founder, as the CEO, how has your role changed over time from early on pitching, probably spending a lot of time really on that focus, to where you are today? I would love to hear, how your role is evolving and changing.
Well, I would certainly say in the early days there was a lot of pitching, and a lot of kind of business planning. But that business planning and those operations, those don't go away. I think, in fact, as a CEO, one of the things that I and I talk about this, a lot, is chasing bottlenecks. It's sort of thinking about, like, we're trying to build a platform, a process, a go-to-market strategy, a customer success strategy where there's no formula for it yet. There isn't another company that I could just say, I'm going to try and do that, but a little bit more efficient here, here, and here. We have to build it. And that means we are totally going to make mistakes in the first couple of rounds, but it's important to learn from those mistakes. So I find a lot of my time certainly working with customers and understanding how to improve our product. That's a really big emphasis of mine, because ultimately, when you're the founder and the CEO, a lot of times, you have a very big voice in ultimately where the platform will go. And it's very important, very, very important that is customer led, and that, you're really listening to what the market and the customers are telling you. So I like to, kind of get involved in different areas of the business. I feel like at our company, we have the culture that, everybody's in the canoe and we're all rowing together. We're at that stage where it's very flat. It's sort of who can help whom. What do you got on your plate? You're booked for the next couple hours. I can do it. That's sort of the vibe and the culture that we're building. So I find that, I'm working on different things every day. I wake up every morning, and it's been different working from home, but I feel like I've kind of gotten into my groove, and I have my espresso machine right over there, which certainly accelerates my morning. But you just kind of start your day with, what are the few key things that have to get done, or the key areas of the team, as each of these departments, again, are new, they're nascent, that need the most help. And that's where you start prioritizing your time.
Yeah, no, that's fantastic. I'm curious, with being in the visual content space, and as you said, somewhat underdeveloped as opposed to, some other areas similar. Is there ever a challenge that maybe there's so much opportunity for different directions that you can go, that you're not just following down a path of others and trying to do something a little bit differently, but it's a pretty wide open territory? Is that ever a challenge to you guys that allows you to lose focus, and how do you maintain focus and continue down the right path, if that makes any sense?
It does. And that was one of the first lessons, that we learned is image is a absolutely massive opportunity. But there's lots of other companies, in other industries that are also pursuing very, very large opportunities. But you nailed it, Tony, is we have to focus. And I think the way that we do that is to the point that I just made. It's being customer obsessed. So there are lots of ideas and lots of brilliant ideas that the team has. I have ideas, I have bad ideas, I have good ideas. And it's important to catalog all of those. It really is. It's important to keep track of all the different things that you've kind of come up with, or you might have heard, because over time it will begin to form a mosaic. But the key areas and where you need to focus is what is solving the problem for my customer today. And the key thing that we used as a sort of trying to think of the term here, but a guiding force of focus is one of the big drivers of many early stage companies is references and referrals. Yeah. So we looked at our customers that had introduced us to other people in the industry that were their peers. And we said, if they did that, this problem must be very, very important. And they must have been so happy with the result that they had, and they just were so thrilled with the opportunity and understanding our stage, right? That we're going to get even better and more complete as a company and as a platform. But we sort of followed the customer obsessively. And that kind of allowed us to, again, listen to feedback from other areas of the market, catalog it. But it's sort of what drove the result that impacted a business outcome that was measurable and successful. and was so successful that for a very small company, they were willing to introduce them to a multi-billion-dollar company, and sort of, and put their name behind it. That, in my mind, was all the validation we needed, that we are on the right path and that we need to continue to investigate that path. And the more that we learn from our customers, the more that we'll ultimately build and, help do even more for them. But without a doubt, focus is a challenge. Time, again, is the one thing you can't make more of. You only have so many hours in the day, as does your team.
No, that's some brilliant feedback on, really focusing on the customer. What does that feedback process or loop look like? You guys have something formal in place? I know you said you spent a lot of time engaging with, your customers. I would just be curious how you guys do that and catalog it and prioritize.
That's a great question. So it's informal, I would say, at this stage, just given the stage that we're at. So for each of our customers, we do have regular check-ins, and that's usually very focused on kind of their strategy. What are they doing? How can Vizit impact that? Or if we can't impact it, is there any other way that we could support you? Is there any advice we could give you? Is there somebody that you could be that you'd be interested to connect with that's complementary to us? We'd be more than happy to introduce you to peers. So I think those types of sessions really help kind of uncover pain points, uncover sort of future needs and other areas in which they're thinking. But it's so important to just build a high amount of trust with the relationship and what you can do, what you can't do, how you can help, how you can't help, because that social equity is really important. Because I've found that the best feedback loops are when you can send a text message or pick up the phone and say, "What do you think about this? Give it to me straight," and you can count on getting a real answer. So I think over time, I'm sure as our company grows and as other companies grow, you build in more machinery and more process around customer feedback. But NPS scores don't help you at this stage. You need to have human conversations with other humans and talk about their problems and talk about your technology, not in a sales context, but in a, here's what we got, here's what we're thinking. Does that vibe with you? What are we missing here? What would you like to see added? And that, I find, is a really great way to sort of get at some of those nuggets that ultimately help shape, your focus and direction.
I love how the recurring theme of the guy from the AI company keeps bringing back being human, right? It's so easy to think that technology and process is going to solve things, but really it's so much about, relationships and learning and all of that. So that's awesome to hear that. Now, you guys work with some major brands. I'm curious how you took the product to market, to start to get those initial customers. Obviously, you said referrals was a way that you grew, which is amazing and outstanding to hear. But I would be curious to hear from a growth perspective how you guys started racking up some wins.
Sure. Well, I think the first thing is, and there's a couple of schools of thought for this, but my philosophy was always, look, just like how time is a very precious resource to me and our team, anybody on the other side of the aisle who is a would-be buyer, time is very important and precious to them too. And you have to sort of just understand that and understand that you need their time and their feedback in order to harden and build out your product. So one of the first and most important things to do with any technology is get case studies. And to get case studies, and again, there's two schools of thought here. One school of thought is always, in the early days, like always make sure that you're paid for every study, and that sets the value of your company and all that. It's like, but you don't know what your value is, and if they'll pay for it, great. But and some folks will just understand what stage you're at and they'll be comfortable with it. But the way that we approached it was, we think that this technology could be applied to this problem that you have. Do you have that problem? Can you tell me a little bit about this? And so what we did is we had a maniacal focus on the success of the first case studies. because we knew that as many AI technology companies are, your core IP is your database and the deep neural networks that are built on top of it. You don't have the, Salesforce.com, portfolio of features and capabilities. It's just not there yet. But you have something, and you have something that could be very, very valuable. So if you don't know yet how people want to interact with it, other tooling that you need to build around it, or how you should even show the output, focus on the outcome that the customer wants. And so in that regard, many and much of our very early work was focused on sort of tech-enabled consulting, if you will, where we'd say, let's focus on your problem and understand what outcome you're trying to achieve. And let's see if there's a way that we could use our technology to do that. And we focused on getting very big brands to do that. And to do that, you had to look for innovators within that company. The CMO probably isn't going to answer your call. A data analyst probably also isn't the right person to mobilize an initiative. You kind of need to find that person in the middle that's looking for a new capability external to the company and is okay with just this is a software pilot with a tech company that has a cool story, cool concept, but we need to really prove it out. So we got some incredible case studies with PepsiCo, with Utz Chips, with Masterlock, with Central Garden Pet. Not all of those were done for free, right? But we put together sort of these examples where through our software we were able to demonstrate a material sales lift. That was what the person cared about. Sales, sales, sales. And now in this world where budgets are tight, there's a lot of different technology players out there. There's a lot of different things you could do. Focusing on the outcome that the customers want, and a lot of times it's growth and lift. If you can show that, others will listen, or they'll give you an audience. And that's really all you need as a startup, is to just say, I've got these wins, I've been successful. Can I have a shot on goal to just prove to you how I think our technology can help? And then as you get more and more of those case studies and references, you can start learning what the market need and pricing is and sort of the right way to package it. Once you start charging, you can funnel that capital back into the development of your platform. And over time, you start to have something that your customers built and that your customers are building. And so it's your job to just continue to listen and listen very acutely. So that's kind of how we went about it. But for sure, we were very, very fortunate to be a part of some incubators that also were able to help introduce us to some of those innovative type leaders. That kind of is an important launch pad.
That's great. Really good stuff. Just given my very limited understanding of AI, I believe there's kind of a certain amount of data that's needed to operate from, or from an effectiveness standpoint. How you got those early customers and getting people to use the platform. How did you work through that? And then does that effectiveness kind of increase over time, or what does that look like, that growth curve of the effectiveness essentially?
Yeah, that's the dirty secret of AI. And AI is only as good as your data. And that's why most AI companies keep their data very, very tight to the vest, and you invest to the vest, and you invest in conditioning and cleaning that data set, because it's just, think of an AI like it's or these neural networks as they know nothing until you teach it. So you have to teach it patterns, and you have to teach it through repetition to identify and recognize certain instances that lead to one classification or one outcome, other examples and instances that lead to another. And then over time, it begins to learn and kind of understand these patterns that will ultimately improve its accuracy. So your data size is very important. It's very hard to create an AI system with 2 data points, but really the quality too. And that's one of the things where Vizit has thrived, because we've created a proprietary database of over 1 trillion visual cues and data points that are feeding our engine. And it took a long time to build, and it took a long time to clean, and it took a long time to harness. And so, that's kind of one of the things where when you see companies talk about AI, like there are lots of different types of AI out there. Sometimes AI can be used as a, rather liberally. In our world, it's deep learning. It's using deep neural networks that ultimately learn to kind of simulate the way the human brain visually processes imagery. And to do that, just like you, I've never seen your background before, Tony, but my brain had developed an instant perspective because it related it to millions and millions of things that I had seen over my lifetime. That's what this AI is ultimately trained to do. So you kind of learn through repetition, and then over time it gets even smarter. But they can be expensive to maintain. So there's always, investments in infrastructure, investments in optimization and rigor. Because if you're giving your customers an AI recommendation, that needs to be accurate, and it needs to be explainable. Because if you can't do that, it's very hard to trust. As you could imagine, in healthcare applications for AI, you're now seeing really cool systems being developed that can detect early stage cancer in a variety of different areas. How do they do that? Because some company that is in the medical industry has thousands and thousands and thousands of annotated radiologist reports. This is, this isn't, this is, this isn't, this is, this isn't. So that's their IP, that's their data. And they're training these algorithms to classify and understand sort of that instance, so that it's not going to replace the radiologist. It's a decision guide or an enhancement. So imagine they come into the room and it highlights something. Could be problematic, X% sure. How many more times could that, could you avoid a false negative, for example? In our world, it's about, de-risking and ensuring that the content and the products that you put out into market are actually going to get a positive market reaction, market response. So our problem is a lot more complex, because we aren't simulating that one classification. We're trying to simulate an entire group of people.
Yeah. So
it gets very complicated. But we fortunately have some incredible brain power on the team that has really helped us crack it.
And then, in this whole space of this visual content and understanding it and being predictive with it, how does the whole, consumer sophistication play into it? I once heard the example of, with like the introduction of Instagram. This was years ago I heard, but someone told me that, and it made sense. Our brain used to take a lot longer to look and determine something to be a stock photograph, because we didn't see it as often. And now, because we see, genuine, authentic photographs all the time, we can, in a split second, determine, oh, this is stock, this is not. And so as that sophistication is happening, how does that impact what you guys are doing? And it probably makes what you guys are doing more important. But I would love to get your take, on how do you stay ahead of that curve, what's happening in the market with the consumers?
Yeah, so you nailed it. Because our system is learning from what's happening in the market. So we're staying abreast of those trends and helping our customers kind of action on them and take advantage of those sort of hidden insights based on where visual preference and visual appetites are shifting, right? Because people eat with their eyes. But the reality, if you're a brand or a retailer, is there's a content crisis going on right now. Even when we're all watching Netflix, you're seeing a lot of the same stuff. And so that has sort of created this need and this burgeoning, investment and emphasis at these companies to invest in new and higher quality content. Because the sea of same, if you exist in the sea of same, you are lost, which means you're losing conversions, you're losing traffic, you're losing interest. If you're a retailer, you're losing retention. I was reading somewhere that I think like 80% of like new customer acquisition, like you acquire a customer and they buy from retailer once. So if you're not personalizing and really understanding visually how to kind of elevate your experience and the experience they have with your brand, it could be catastrophic. So I find that when we approach this problem, it's, look, we're going to give you the best and most accurate information as fast as possible on what visuals motivate the actions you care about. And we'll do it through our real-time platform and sort of democratize access to that information to your decision makers, because you don't have time and you can't afford to guess. You can't always use stock. And if you wanted to do traditional market research and go survey every single piece of content you made, you're going to get a multi-million-dollar bill at the end of the year. And 6 months too late when you needed the insight in the first place. So it's a very fascinating, content starvation is real, is what I'd say on that.
Makes a ton of sense. It's pretty crazy to think about. Just it just grows, and it's not going away, and we know that. So fascinating stuff that you're doing. I'm going to throw out one last question, and this can be what you guys are doing. This could be anything else. Again, this relates to how we work, how we live, how we play. But we like to ask on this show, what is the one technology that you personally are really excited about that, in the next 3 to 5 years, you really think is going to have a big impact?
Sure. Well, I certainly have a biased take to that. But I would say that, again, our story, my story, our team's story, we are purely focused on imagery. And image as a concept has been completely undermeasured. And if you can't measure something, you can't manage it and you can't optimize it. So I think, whether it's Visit, other technologies that really start to help brands understand how to harness visual data, I think that's incredibly exciting, because text has been done and it's lost its commercial power, the impact of those insights. Audio has been done by some very powerful companies. Visual has not. And so I feel that, and in our category that we call visual brand performance, the concept of, Mountain Dew or Axe body spray being a visual brand with visual experiences and visual touch points that drive and condition and connect with their customers. The ability to measure that and optimize it is in my mind kind of game changing, because of this new world we live in that is an infinite scroll. The scroll is truth, and understanding that truth is going to change industries. So I feel that, visual is just such an exciting place to be, and I couldn't be more happy to be just a little part of it.
That's awesome. I agree with you. I think this is some incredible stuff. We're just about out of time, but first of all, I want to thank you. This has been fantastic. I could probably go, continue this conversation quite a bit longer, but for the sake of time, last thing, just Jehan, where can we, people that are tuning in, where can we learn more about you, about Visit, what you guys are up to?
Absolutely. So visit.com, VIZIT.com is sort of home base. We're doing a lot of kind of research and insights on some really cool things. So please do, follow us. We're on LinkedIn. Same thing, Visit Labs. Just look for us there. But reach out. We'd love to hear from you. If you're in Boston, when the world opens up, it'd be cool to get a beer sometime. But we really appreciate the opportunity to be here and talk about Visit.
Well, very cool. again, Jehan, thank you so much. We appreciate your time here. You're doing some amazing things and appreciate you sharing with us. So thank you. And to everybody tuning in, we will see you next time. Thanks for joining. Take care, everybody.
Thank you.